A reading from the 13th chapter of St. Matthew. He put before them another parable. The kingdom of heaven may be compared to someone who sowed good seed in his field. But while everyone was asleep, an enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat and then went away. So when the plants came up and bore grain, then the weeds appeared as well. And the slaves of the householder came and said to him, "Master, did you not sow good seed in your field? Where then did these weeds come from?" He answered, "An enemy has done this." The slaves said to him, Then do you want us to go and gather them?" But he replied, "No, for in gathering the weeds you would uproot the wheat along with them. Let both of them grow together until the harvest. And at harvest time, I will tell the reapers, collect the weeds first and bind them in bundles to be burned, but gather the wheat into my barn." He put before them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed that someone took and sowed in his field. It is the smallest of all seeds, but when it has grown, it is the greatest of shrubs and becomes a tree, so that the birds of the air come and make nests in its branches. He told them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like yeast that a woman took and mixed in with 3 measures of flour until all of it was leavened. Jesus told the crowds all these things in parables. Without a parable, he told them nothing. This was to fulfill what had been spoken through the prophet. "I will open my mouth to speak in parables. I will proclaim what has been hidden from the foundation of the world." Then he left the crowds and went into the house, and his disciples approached him, saying, "Explain to us the parables of the weeds of the field." He answered, "The one who sows the good seed is the Son of Man. The field is the world, and the good seed are the children of the kingdom. The weeds are the children of the evil one, and the enemy who sowed them is the devil. The harvest is the end of the age, and the reapers are angels. Just as the weeds are collected and burned up with fire, so will it be at the end of the age. The Son of Man will send his angels, and they will collect out of his kingdom all causes of sin and evildoers, and they will throw them into the furnace of fire, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Then the righteous will shine like the sun in the kingdom of their Father. Let anyone with ears listen. The kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in a field, which someone found and hid, and then in his joy he goes and sells all that he has and buys that field. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant in search of fine pearls. On finding one pearl of great value, he went and sold all that he had and bought it. This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
So as we start to wrap up the season of Epiphany and our Your Kingdom Come worship series, we have a series of kingdom parables before us today. And the message is clear. The kingdom of heaven is weird. Seriously weird. The kingdom of heaven is easy to miss. It's comparable to a mustard seed, the smallest of all seeds. It's like yeast. It's like a pearl. Pearls, of course, are beautiful. They're very valuable. According to the parable that Jesus told, they can become an obsession. They also happen to be an immune response. They're commonly believed to be caused by a grain of sand, which an oyster encases, but that's actually almost never the case. Pearls are most often created by an oyster defending itself against a microscopic intruder, usually a parasite, which gets in and starts to irritate it. And the byproduct of the oyster protecting itself is the jewel that we value. Now, once formed, that tiny pearl, of course, must be sought out. They don't bring them to us. We must go looking for it. And much of their value comes from the fact that they are rare. So those who go looking for them don't find them often. And finding that perfect pearl, that's exceedingly rare. Which makes pearls very different from mustard seeds. I mean, sure, they're tiny, but that tiny mustard seed grows into an impressive tree. That makes it no less of a weed, of course. I mean, it's not a plant we want. It's not a plant any normal person would sow in their field. Many of you wage the same war I do every spring and summer against dandelions and thistles and creeping Charlie, to name just a few, right? Who would plant these things on purpose? If you're not diligent, they just take over. Which in a sense is what yeast does, isn't it? The woman with the yeast literally hides it in the flour, according to the Greek from which our text is translated. She hides it in 3 measures of flour, which I'm sure all of you bakers realize is about 40 pounds of flour. Given enough warmth and time, the yeast will eventually work its way through all of that dough, creating the kind of leavened bread that most of us are used to eating on a daily basis. Do you happen to remember what kind of bread God told the Jews to eat on the night before Passover? They didn't have time for the dough to rise, right? So they ate unleavened bread. To this day, observant Jews only eat unleavened bread when they celebrate Passover. They're even required to remove yeast from their houses for the occasion. A little bit after this in Matthew's Gospel, Jesus will warn his disciples against the leaven of the teachings of the Pharisees. So how is the kingdom of heaven like yeast, which is expected to be removed from homes at one of the holiest times of the year, which has long been a symbol of invasive and corrupting power? How is the kingdom of heaven like a tiny seed that grows into a giant weed tree that we don't want around, but which provides a home for wild animals? How is the kingdom of heaven like a small hidden pearl, a treasure formed out of disease and suffering? And how is any of this relevant to our current postmodern context today? I think it's probably relevant that all of these parables that Jesus used to describe the kingdom of heaven rely on comparisons to such small things. While these small things eventually take over, only in the case of the mustard seed does it do so by becoming large. The yeast, the pearl, they stay small. Like other subjects of kingdom metaphors Jesus used elsewhere, such as salt or light. And there's no question that in our society, size does matter. So what does it mean that essentially all of the parables that Jesus told about the kingdom involve small things that exert huge influence on what is around them? What does it mean for us that some of these things continue to remain hidden? I mean, after all, when's the last time any of you tasted a wonderful piece of bread and exclaimed something about the yeast? But it makes a difference. We're going to do a seemingly small, insignificant thing today. For one of the smallest people among us, we're going to baptize Colton, who's just a little baby. And we're going to use just a little bit of water. We claim that that small amount of water is enough to make him completely clean. We have faith that through those droplets of water and the promises spoken, Colton's whole life changes. We believe God claims Colton through baptism, and he becomes marked as a child of God forever. And we believe Colton, who is still too little to do much of any significance, we believe he's worth it. By any worldly measurement, Colton does not measure up to much. I mean, he can't cook, he can't clean, he can't take care of himself, much less anyone else. He certainly can't earn a paycheck. By the world's standards, there's very little value there. But his parents, his grandparents, his aunts and uncles, other family and friends, I would bet anyone who has had a chance to hold him has experienced how priceless a treasure he is. Colton is a living symbol of the kingdom of heaven. And so are all of you who have been baptized. What if most of our Christian brothers and sisters in our country have it wrong? Especially all of them who are convinced that it is so important for Christians to wield political power. That does not seem to be the power of a mustard seed, or a pearl, or yeast, or salt. The same seems to be true of all the megachurches and those who spend all their time on church growth. What if the kingdom of heaven isn't like the huge churches meeting in stadiums or across half a dozen campuses? What if the kingdom of God isn't interested in aligning itself with the kingdoms of our world? What if the kingdom of heaven is more like a small congregation? The kind of congregation where new people come and find a place where they are accepted as they are, a place where they can share their gifts, learn about themselves, learn about God's love for them, a place where they can safely try out leadership positions. What if the kingdom of heaven is like a congregation where people come and learn new things, new ways of being the church, and then move on with new gifts and new insights and greater faith to share with another congregation and a new community somewhere else, spreading those new learnings? What if the kingdom of heaven is like a congregation that is full of faithful people who don't necessarily look remarkable from the outside? The kind of congregation that isn't known for any particular event or program, but whose members quietly support and make possible many of the events and ministries that happen throughout their communities. The kingdom of heaven is like yeast leavening bread. You cannot see its growth, but you can see the effect when it has been at work. It permeates its surroundings. It changes them all. The kingdom of heaven is like a weed that takes over. The kingdom of heaven is like a treasure that one becomes obsessed with. The kingdom of heaven is usually outside the bounds of regular society, yet working from within to change that society. I firmly believe that to see the kingdom of heaven, to become aware of it in our midst, requires us to see how God operates differently from the way the world operates. If you really want to know where God is at work, really want to see the kingdom taking shape, it requires being able to notice yeast permeating the dough. Or maybe actually what it takes is the faith to trust that the yeast has done so. It requires the patience to let the weeds and the wheat grow together, to trust that all will be sorted in the harvest. And it certainly requires letting go of the world's usual measuring sticks. The kingdom of heaven does not often look like our world's definition of success. God is much more creative than that. But once you do notice the kingdom, well, most people would do anything to catch another glimpse.